and welcome inside Upon Further Review of P. Marsh and Michael, presented by Underdog Fantasy. Glad to have you with us. I wish it were under better circumstances. Hard to believe, but the Broncos have now lost 15 straight games to the Kansas City Chiefs. That is where we sit as we start the new year. New year, same old Broncos. Alongside my partner, Brandon Marshall, I'm Michael Spencer. Glad to have you with us. B. Marsh, let's jump right into the show today, shall we? What's on B. Marsh's mind is brought to you by Breckenridge Distillery, the official bourbon of the Denver Broncos. Shop Colorado retailers for their limited edition Broncos bourbon blends. And B. Marsh, we didn't have a show last week, so you've been holding on to something. Give it to me.
I've been holding on to this because I've been feeling slighted because people have been saying that this defense is either comparable or better than the 2015 defense. And that goes out the window because last week, the defense let Baker Mayfield put up a 50 burger on this defense. So you can't tell me that this defense is better than our no-fly zone. No way. Baker Mayfield was very efficient. I think he threw about maybe 3 touchdowns. There's no way this defense is better than our defense if they let Baker Mayfield do that to him. No way.
Now, Brandon, does it look a little bit better that that the Rams defense scored one of those touchdowns? So the defense really didn't give up 50 plus. I'm being sarcastic. No, of course.
Absolutely not, man. That was terrible. I can't believe that.
Yeah. You go back to last week, and obviously that game against the Rams on Christmas Day leads to the firing of Nathaniel Hackett. We didn't have a chance to talk about that. What did you make of that move, Brandon, and what did you make of the way the team responded despite the fact that they lost to Kansas City in Week 17? I thought it was the right move for this organization. You can't get embarrassed like that. I thought it sent a really strong message to everybody in that locker room from top down, even from the coaching staff, that what has happened through the first X amount of weeks, first 16 weeks of this season is not acceptable. I loved the move from Greg Pinner. What about you?
I love the move too. It's definitely, it was unacceptable. It's not the standard of this organization, right? So, we've been talking about it all season. Look, what Nathaniel Hackett needed to do to not get fired, certain things, but I think it was inevitable. And the new ownership is in win now mode. They don't want to wait. They don't want to say, we'll give Nathaniel Hackett a couple years, let the system kind of set in. No. It's time. We have to win right now. We have a $250 million quarterback. We cannot wait. So I thought the move was great. I think it's great for the organization moving forward, and I'm sure they got some good candidates lined up.
And Brandon, I think that what we have seen from Jerry Rosburg over the last week is exactly what the Broncos should be looking for when they look for a new head coach. He came in, he immediately made changes to the coaching staff, firing Dwayne Stukes, firing Butch Berry. He immediately made a statement by benching Montrell Washington as a healthy scratch in Sunday's game, saying that, hey, my special teams unit, which, oh, by the way, is his specialty, has not been up to par. And I thought that he – not only that, but he instilled confidence in Albert Okwuegbunam, which paid off with his touchdown reception the other day. And it's clear that there is now an adult in the room. And I think that has made a huge, huge difference. I think that's part of what we saw in Sunday's loss to the Chiefs. And I think that's what the Broncos need moving forward. Because what's happened over the last 7 years now has been this unacceptable standard of play.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's what you said. It's now 7 years in a row or 6 years in a row they haven't made the playoffs. That's not, the standard of this organization. The Denver Broncos is an organization that is known for winning. It's just in our history. It's in our blood, right? So for these things that have been going on for so long, and then now new ownership coming in and say, no, we're gonna, make things right. We're gonna, I think the firing of Nathaniel Hackett to me was. I was hoping that they would do that, right? I was hoping. Now, when it comes to George Paton, I'm not sure what's going to happen with him. I'm not sure. They'll probably I'm sure he has a little bit of a longer leash than obviously Nathaniel Hackett had. But, having fresh eyes come in and a fresh perspective, he noticed certain things that Nathaniel Hackett, wouldn't do, right? So I'm glad they instilled confidence in Albert O. I'm glad they made certain changes. It sucks that we only had 2 weeks to see what could happen, potentially,
Yeah.
Honestly, I would have loved to see this move 5, 6 weeks ago. That probably was too soon, but honestly, to see what could have happened, and who knows, But I think this is, good. I have a good feeling about this moving forward, and hopefully they find the right head coach for this team.
Well, and I thought the way that they played on Sunday was an indictment on Nathaniel Hackett and what he allowed to transpire. Because you heard Russell Wilson say, we had our best practice of the week. earlier in the week. And then he said post game after a loss to Kansas City, he said I thought we played our best game of the season in terms of complimentary football. That is an indictment on what was going on with Nathaniel Hackett in charge. So I think that that's something to really keep in mind. And when you're talking about George Paton, he was the guy who hired Nathaniel Hackett. He was the guy who stood by Nathaniel Hackett early in the season when there was pressure and who said, oh, well, it's just the amount of scrutiny that he's gotten is only because we played so many games on national television. No, it's not. It's because he's been terrible. And George Paton, I think you're right. I think he does have a little bit of a longer leash, but he's to blame for a lot of what has gone on here. And I think that he is on very thin ice. And if I'm Greg Pinner, I'm looking at it like, what decision have you made, George, that has turned out really great? What decision have you made that has put our franchise moving forward and not moving backward? And so I think that they give him probably another year, but I think it's very telling that Greg Pinner is going to be the guy who's in charge of hiring the head coach. That Greg Pinner is going to be the guy who makes that next big decision because George Paton swung and missed on this one.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's taking matters into his own hands. No, it's his team. He's like, look, I'm not letting these things slide. I'm here to win. I'm not just here to say, this is my football team. I'm here to win, right? And I love that. I love that approach that he's taken. So, and as far as Russell Wilson saying it's the best practice we had and we played the best, like you said, that is an indictment on Nathaniel Hackett. Clearly he's not cut out to be a head coach. He would probably never, not even probably, he would never be a head coach again.
He's done.
He's done. He's cooked. He might be offensive coordinator, maybe a quarterbacks, receivers coach, whatever his trade is, his specialty is. But as a head coach, it's over for him. So, and I hate the excuse he's only under this amount of scrutiny because we've been on national television.
He's terrible.
It's terrible, man. He just put a bad product out there. We put a bad product out there. Terrible. People I've seen, on Broncos, they hate watching the Broncos games because, it was just terrible offense, good defense, but just awful offense. It's not exciting. People say, it's crazy because I hate or it's boring watching football. Nobody really says that. That's not really a statement that people make. People love watching football, but watching Broncos football is boring. So it's just a bad product out there. And I'm glad that he's gone. I'm sure most of the players are glad that he's gone as well. So, we'll see what happens moving forward.
George Paton said something interesting in the press conference after they fired Nathaniel Hackett. He said that experience would be nice, but isn't necessary in the next head coach. And Brandon, the way I look at this is you've had Vance Joseph, Vic Fangio, and now Nathaniel Hackett, 3 first-time head coaches. None of those made it past year 2, right? Nathaniel Hackett didn't even make it out of year 1. Yeah. I think experience should absolutely be a requirement. Now, that probably means you're going to get a guy who got fired, but that's what happens to head coaches. And I think that head coaches learn from that experience and that there's a lot of head coaches who become better in their second time around. As a player, if you're Justin Simmons and you've gone through all of this, right, and he's the only guy other than Brandon McManus who's been through all of this together, do you think that experience should play a role here?
I think so because, like you said, we've tried 3 first-time head coaches, and when George Paton said it's not necessary because you look at the Sean McVays, the Kevin O'Connells, right, the guys that have been first-time head coaches and have won, right? Look at the Vikings right now. They have a first-time head coach and they're playing extremely well. It's so I get when he says that, but we've interviewed the wrong guys apparently. We've swung and missed. So I understand what he's saying, but now maybe we need to take a different approach, right? We try to, just like they tried to hire 2 defensive-minded coaches, so they try to take a different approach and hire offensive-minded coaches. That didn't work, right? So maybe you go get a Sean Payton. Maybe you go get a Jim Harbaugh, right? You go get a guy or guys that have proven that they can win in this league. So I think that's what you should do at this point because everything else hasn't worked.
All right, when we come back, we haven't even talked about the game on Sunday in Kansas City and what happened and what it is going to take to beat the Chiefs. I've got some thoughts on what it will take to beat Kansas City and the fact that it is going to take at least another year. And that storyline of 15 straight games in September of 2015 continues to live on as the Broncos fall 27-24 to KC in Week 7. we will discuss that, plus hand out some grades from that game against the Chiefs. Next, right here on Upon Further Review of B. Marsh and Michael, presented by Underdog Fantasy.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store. Welcome back to Upon Further Review of B. Marsh and Michael, presented by Underdog Fantasy. Glad to have you with us on our penultimate episode. I believe that is correct. We've got this episode and then the season finale coming to you next week. B. Marsh, you can be in studio for that. Fingers crossed, and looking forward to that. Always love doing the show in studio with you, and certainly a lot to talk about as the Broncos have one game left, a Sunday afternoon kickoff at Mile High, 2:25. You can see it on CBS 4 for those of you in the Denver viewing area. Before we talk about the Chargers, B. Marsh, we'll deal with them next week. Let's go back to the Chiefs. In this game in Kansas City, I thought Russ played really well. Obviously, he'd love to have that interception back. I thought that the 2 turnovers were the big difference in this game. But I thought that seeing Russell Wilson use his feet, it was just the 3rd time in his career he's had multiple rushing touchdowns in a game. I was like, oh, so Russell Wilson still can run. The question is, where was this all season long? What did you make of what we saw from the Broncos in Kansas City on Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, I think he was finally just saying, yo, I'm going to make a play, instead of just trying to be that precision pocket passer. And I understand that there's an element to that. It is important to be able to throw the ball and throw it well and throw it accurately. But the game has changed. Most of the quarterbacks in the NFL are now mobile. You look at Justin Fields, right? He had 5 carries for 105 yards. You know what I'm saying? In the first quarter, by the way. And so, win by any means. It's not necessarily, about being the most precision or precise passer, right? However we got to get it done, let's get it done. So I love the 2 rushing touchdowns. I love him saying, the mindset saying, you know what, I'm going to get it done. We're going to score no matter what. You know what I'm saying?
And
no matter what.
I think the Broncos need that from Russ at the beginning of the year too, right? Like not just late when the playoffs are out of the picture and we're trying to beat Kansas City just in this streak. I think they need that from Russ, and I think that whoever comes in to be the head coach, whether it's an offensive guy or a defensive guy, whoever is in charge of that offense needs to have that be priority number 1, is how do we get Russell Wilson? I don't need him at 100% of what we saw in Seattle, but I need him at like 75. And we're paying him like he should be playing at like 95% of what he was in Seattle. If I'm the Broncos, that's what I'm thinking. So I think that I think that's priority number 1 for this franchise moving forward. The other question, Brandon, is how does this franchise figure out a way to beat Kansas City? Because we had Todd Davis, your former teammate, on our show last night. He said, hey, it's going to take 40 or 50 points. You're just going to have to outscore them at this point. What is it going to take for this franchise to beat Kansas City? And you think that next year will be the year?
Yeah, they'll beat them next year. I don't take 40 or 50 points. I think that's a little excessive. It would be nice, if we could put up 40 and 50. But I think that's a little excessive. We played Kansas City really tough this year. The first 2 games, these 2 games, we played them tough. I think we can get over the hump. I think it's a little bit about being more efficient as an offense. Yeah. Takeovers on defense. I think we have to win the turnover margin. We have to win the turnover margin to try to beat Kansas City. And it's crazy because all 3 phases have to be on point. Offense, defense, and special teams. We have to win the field position battle as well as win the turnover margin. So I think if we win the field position battle, we win the turnover margin. I think we can beat those guys. And because we've showed that we can play with them, right? We've showed this year we showed that we can play with those guys, right? So
even down 27-0, yeah.
What'd you say?
I said even down 27-0.
Even down 27-0, right? We can play with them, right? So I think it'll take a couple things. And look, Patrick Mahomes is all world, right? So he's going to make his plays. It is what it is. Travis Kelce is all world as well. He's going to make his plays as well. So, look, we just, it's almost a bend, don't break mentality against Kansas City because they are that special on offense. On defense, they're not that special. So that's why we need, next year, whoever comes in and runs this offense, we need something exotic. We need certain things that can, get guys open. We got to expose that team. We got to be able to run the football as well. We got to be able to run the football on them. We got to be able to control the clock. If we can keep Patrick Mahomes on the bench, because if you look, it's the Cincinnati blueprint. Cincinnati plays Kansas City extremely well. You know what I'm saying? Patrick Mahomes stays on the bench. They know how to sustain drives against Kansas City. They know how to play defense against Kansas City. Whatever tape, because when I used to play, we would almost run whatever defense worked the best on whatever offense we're playing next week. So they need to go ahead and watch that tape, watch the Cincinnati tape for the last 2 years, and literally say, okay, we're going to run these coverages because this is containing these guys and this is working against those boys.
Well, they talk about it all the time, right? It's a copycat league. And if it's working, Kansas City continued to do that. You mentioned Mahomes and the plays that he makes. He had one of those yesterday where the ball gets tipped at the line, he catches it, and then ends up, I think it was set up a 3rd and 1 or something like that. Like, it was just one of those plays where it's like Patrick Mahomes does something ridiculous almost every game, but certainly every time that he plays the Broncos. This is really, really incredible. All right, let's jump into our report card. Today's report card brought to you by the Colorado Lottery. Play CBS 4 Pick the Score for your chance to win $1,000 in scratch tickets. Enter at cbscolorado.com/contest. B-Marsh, you mentioned winning the turnover battle and winning the takeaways. Simmons had a large part in that yesterday. He ended up even at 2-2 in terms of turnovers, but Justin Simmons has been on a tear, and you've got your eye on the Broncos safety. You're giving him a grade this afternoon.
Yeah, man, look, Justin Simmons, he's on his way to being a Ring of Famer in the Broncos history. If he continues to play like he plays, I mean, he had a 6th interception, yesterday. Look, Justin Simmons is all world. He's, one of the best, if not the best safety in the NFL. I'm going to give him a grade of an A, man. Justin Simmons is all over the field. He is the best player that they have on defense. That stout defense, they have a really good defense, right? Justin Simmons is the key catalyst of that defense, so I'm going to give him an A.
New career high for Justin Simmons with 6 interceptions, 5 last season, and it was tied with that entering and still has one game to go. I'm going to hand out a B to Albert O. And yes, I'm a little bit of a homer here because of our Missouri connection, but talk about a guy who rebounded really nicely. He was a healthy scratch for several games this season. And then Greg Dulcich goes down. And Jerry Rosburg was funny. I mean, talk about another indictment on Nathaniel Hackett. He was like, I see Albert O as just like a physical specimen, and I'm wondering why he can't even get on the field. And then Jerry Rosburg takes over, puts him on the field, and he rewards him with his first touchdown of the season. So I don't know what Albert O's future is here in Denver, but I do know that he showed a lot of mental fortitude fighting through those healthy scratches and then being ready when his number was called. Had a drop early in the game, but obviously rebounded nicely with that touchdown. So I'm going to give Albert O a B for what we saw yesterday. Brandon, how hard is that from a player perspective when you basically have been replaced and you have to stay ready, but you don't know when your number is going to be called?
It's extremely tough. And I like what you said. You said that mental fortitude. He was, because really I'm sure his confidence got shot a little bit. And it happens, right? The NFL will kill your confidence. And it's very tough, because honestly, just talking to a lot of players, when they reach the pro level, the NFL level, it took the love out of the game for them because it's so political. It's not always about who's the best. It's not always about who's the most talented. It's about money, right? It's about who's cheaper or maybe the perception, whatever coach feels, whatever way about you. You know what I'm saying? So it takes the fun and the love out of the game, right? Also, you're worried about your job 24/7. You don't know if you're gonna stay there next week or whatever the case may be. So Albert O, I'm not sure if they didn't like his personality or whatever the case may be. He's definitely a physical specimen. So the fact that he stayed ready, he didn't let whatever happened to him the whole season get to him, that much because I look at a guy like Sua, right? Sua Cravens. Mm-hmm. He let a lot of stuff get to him and emotionally, and I'm not mad at that because we take it. It's not like we're just this is a job we decided to pick up, right? We put our heart and soul and our bodies to this thing. So when we feel slighted by a coach or slighted by a situation, it hurts us, right? And some people handle it different ways. So shout out to Albert O for handling it the right way. He got another opportunity. He scored a touchdown. He's going to continue to prove his worth. So I think that's the biggest part for me because I know the toll it can take on a player mentally and mentally and emotionally, physically. Right, as far as the NFL goes and how much it takes the love out of the game for a lot of guys. And that's something that's not really spoken about. A lot of the fans and people don't really understand that the game is pure in high school. Pop Warner High School is pure. College is a little more politics. But in the NFL, the politics are crazy. And a lot of guys end up not loving it. So shout out to Alberto for continuing and fighting through it no matter what.
Yeah, we'll see what he has in store for the season finale coming up on Sunday, 2:25 kickoff at Mile High against the Chargers. We got to take another quick timeout. When we come back, we will zoom around the league, tell you what stood out to us from week 17 and get you set for week 18. Plus, we've got an underdog fantasy. It all comes down to this one final game as set for our underdog fantasy matchup. That and more next right here on Upon Further Review of P. and Michael, presented by Underdog Fantasy.
Travel consideration is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing app in the industry. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store.
Back inside Upon Further Review of P. and Michael, presented by Underdog Fantasy. It is time for us to zoom around the league. Zoom around the league brought to you by ZoomCare.com. Visit ZoomCare.com to learn more about their Beyond Better urgent and primary healthcare clinics in Denver and in Boulder. B-Marsh, obviously a lot going on last week. I don't know if I'm in the NFC, how I feel about playing the Green Bay Packers right now, given what they have done. This is a crazy turnaround. They had lost 7 of their last 8. They've now won 4 straight and are likely going to make the playoffs. They'll play on Sunday Night Football against the Lions. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers punch their ticket and will be the winner from the NFC South and be the 4 seed. Is there something to that, Brandon, where like when you're an opposing team and these teams get hot, it seems like that's sometimes just the route of winning a Super Bowl or certainly having a long playoff run. Not necessarily maybe who's the best team or who's been the best team for 17, 18 weeks. It's just who gets hot at the right time. And I don't want to see Aaron Rodgers and I don't want to see Tom Brady in the playoffs.
That's all what's it about, man. Honestly, you look at the New York Giants, their Super Bowl runs, they weren't the best team in the league, got hot at the right time. So, Matt LaFleur, I want to say I've seen a stat where he's undefeated in December, right? So those guys are getting hot at the right time. Tom Brady knows when to turn it on and get hot at the right time. That's what it's about. Speaking of getting hot at the right time, my fantasy team, we were 8-6, okay, middle of the pack. I was the 5th seed. I got hot at the right time, and I made it all the way to the championship. Now, I lost the championship, but we got hot at the right time. So it's about what happens in December. You know what I'm saying? It's not about September. So that's why I kind of worry about the Eagles. They've been hot all year. Yeah. But can they sustain that when it gets cold and when the tough gets, when the going gets tough and when teams are at their best, right? So it's not about what happened all year. It's about what happened in December. And so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the Eagles have now lost 2 straight. Speaking of losing a whole bunch, your Vegas Raiders, which is obviously where you are. I call them your Vegas Raiders. You were part of the team for what a wild game on Sunday against the San Francisco 49ers. And B-Marsh, what's going on in Vegas? Because it's not just the quarterback, right? Obviously, it's something else. They're blowing a whole bunch of leads. I don't like the way that they treated Derek Carr. I think that man gave so much to that organization, and for them to just send him home for the last 2 weeks of the season is a huge slap in the face. Very Josh McDaniels-ish, but I still don't like the fact that they did that.
Yeah, I don't like how they treated Derek either. Derek is a man. He's a professional. He's like you said. He's given his all. Has he always played his best or whatever? Perceived that could be his best? Absolutely not. But Derek is what has been the face of the franchise for a very long time. He's been a good quarterback, great in the media, no trouble. So, the way they treated him, that just by sending him home, I thought it was a little tasteless, to be honest with you. And it's not all Derek Carr, man. His defense has been terrible. His defense has been terrible since he's been in the league. I want to say there was a stat, I think they've been 32nd in the league in defense over that span of time, right? So how can he truly win? How can he truly be, take his team to where they think he should take his team if the defense isn't great, right? So the secondary has been very suspect for years. They finally got a pass rusher in Max Crosby and Chandler Jones, which Chandler hasn't been doing a lot this year, but it's the defense, right? And so I think they could have treated Derek Carr. They could have gave him they could have let him play his last 2 games, gave him the send-off, but maybe they wanted to see what Jarrett Stidham had. Now, he played well, right? Jared played well. I thought he played pretty decent,
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like So
well, and it's all about the money with Derek Carr. Like they'll tell you that they want to see what they're getting out of Jarrett Stidham. It's the fact that his contract is guaranteed against the injury, and they don't want to pay him $40 million. And if he gets hurt off the facility, then they're not on the hook for that. So just don't even come to the facility, would you? It's all about the money, and that's what you were talking about in the last segment, right? Like, that is part of the mind games of the NFL.
Yeah, follow the money trail. When they say, you know, to figure something out, follow the money. And that's what's going on. They don't want to have to pay that man. They're going to try to trade him. I'm not sure who will take on that $40 million or, you know, whatever he has in his contract. Somebody potentially will. So, you know, we'll see. Because he's still a top 15 quarterback, you know. Yeah. He's top half of the league.
I think you can win with Derek Carr. I think he's going to make some blunders, but I think you can win with Derek Carr, and I'll be interested to see how that all shakes out with Devontae Adams and a guy who went there specifically to play with Derek Carr, his college buddy and college teammate. And you think about all that Derek Carr has had to endure off the field with the Ruggs incident, and then the John Gruden emails and all of that stuff where he just stood there and took all those bullets for everybody else. And this is how the Raiders reward him. Really, really kind of sad, in my opinion. All right, let's jump into our Underdog Fantasy game. Underdog Fantasy, it's the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. Now, we are going to play a game next week, but for the purposes of paying it off, we don't have a show 2 weeks from now. So this is basically all what it comes down to. Team B-Marsh got a good win last week, 49.8 to 37.8, thanks to Aaron Jones and Evan Ingram. So B-Marsh, we are tied here entering the final week of the season. We got a great game on Monday Night Football, the Bengals and the Bills. You get to go first in this one. No, wait, actually, I'm going first because I'm going first. So I'm going to go with Stephon Diggs, Bills wide receiver. I like the Bills to win tonight. I think Stephon Diggs gets into the end zone at least once. Give me Stephon Diggs with my number one pick.
20 targets a game. I mean, you know, how can you go against them? You know, so that's great. I'm going to go with Jamar Chase.
Okay, that was going to be my other pick, right? Like, I think those two guys are in for a good night tonight.
You couldn't go wrong. I'm going with Jamar Chase, and I'm going to go with Joe Mixon.
Big on the Bengals. Big Bengals fan tonight with their two weapons right there. So I'm going to go with Singletary, and then I'm going to go with T. Higgins, the other Bengals receiver. I know I've talked about it before. I love T. Higgins, covered him when he was in high school. It's weird that I feel old now that he's playing in the NFL, but I'm going to go with T. Higgins and Singletary, my picks for 2 and 3. Who you got? 2 more.
Okay, 2 more. I'm going to go with, you know, somebody he's very shaky. I mean, he can get you 2 points or 40 points. So I'm going to go with Gabe Davis.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to do a pick almost like that one time I want to say you picked Taysom Hill. And it was like a hit or miss, but he scored. I want to say he scored 2 touchdowns, right? So that got you. So I'm going to follow that same blueprint. I'm going to go with Isaiah McKenzie. A lot of times they draw plays for him, so hopefully he gets it done.
Your former Broncos teammate, Isaiah McKenzie. Talk about a guy who has found a new life in Buffalo. And good for him. Obviously, things didn't work out here in Denver, but good for him for fighting through that and obviously finding a new life in Buffalo. I'm going to go with Hayden Hurst to round it out. So my four guys this week: Diggs, Singletary, Higgins, Hayden Hurst, and then Team Marshall, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, Gabe Davis, and Isaiah McKenzie. This segment brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. Download it today. B-Marsh, that's going to do it. We got one show left, and looking forward, as I said earlier, to having you in studio next weekend.
Hey, look, you know, I always love being in the studio with you, man. It's been fun for years. You know, when I used to go back to you know, going to the View House with you, so it's always been great. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we will close it out the right way next week, no doubt about that. That is going to do it for this week's edition of Upon Further Review with B-Marsh and Michael, presented by Underdog Fantasy. Thanks so much for logging on to CBS News Colorado or wherever you get your podcast. We will see you next week. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. It's also the fastest growing fantasy app in the industry. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store.